Welcome to Stay Fearless, the FSP podcast with all things baseball performance. I am your co-host and co-founder of Fearless Sports Performance, Joey Hanley.
And I'm your co-host and co-founder, Dr. Alex Acevedo, and welcome to another episode of the pod. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Stay Fearless, the Fearless Sports Performance podcast. Today, we are joined by Jacob Zibin. Zib is originally from Langley, British Columbia, Canada, and moved to Florida to train at TNXL Academy as a junior in high school. He was then drafted by the Cleveland Guardians in the 2022 amateur draft as a 17-year-old, and has been with the Guardians since. He's currently rehabbing from Tommy John surgery, and I was able to work with him during my rotation with the Guardians this spring. Zib is a relentless worker, a constant learner, and an incredible human being. Zib, we couldn't be more excited to have you on and share your insights and experiences with our listeners.
Happy to be here. Happy to be on.
Awesome, man. So let's get started with you grew up in Canada, which I'm not super familiar with Canadian baseball and the player development up there. Tell us about your upbringing in the sport and what your development as a player looked like growing up in Langley. I'm sure the temperature in the winter had something to do with it. And, just let's talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, growing, I kind of always grew up playing baseball. It was always like one of the sports I played. Like I was never a hockey guy, but I did play a lot of sports, basketball, volleyball, did a bit of swimming. So definitely grew up like with an athletic background, and yeah, the weather definitely does play a role in like playing baseball. I remember there'd be fall ball games in October, and it's like, I don't know, it's like 45 degrees outside, and I'm on the mound with heat packs in my back pocket. But yeah, the development in Canada growing up, there wasn't too much, like, obviously you got guys who can teach the fundamentals, but a lot of it was me and my dad. We were very passionate about development. We were very passionate about weight room, about, learning ways to, properly throw, properly, build up workload, volume, and all the rest of it. So it was a lot of like trial and error, and coming up through high school, and right before high school and middle school is when I first really started getting into like the weight room. I really started like working with strength coaches. I went to this powerlifting gym when I was like in the 8th grade, this skinny little, I wasn't terribly athletic back then, and I was really intimidated by all these like high level power lifters, and I was there like working out. But so that was kind of my background with development. And it wasn't until COVID when I first really started getting into like specifically pitcher development. I started doing driveline, like online training, like remote training with driveline, and I kind of got my foot in the door with that, with the whole learning how to build a routine, learning different implements to use to train, and having a good structure in the gym and structure in my throwing program throughout the week, and having a plan was really the next step in learning. And like, not only for myself, but like learning what to filter out in terms of like, as a baseball player, you got a ton of information coming at you. So that was kind of my first step in as a freshman. And obviously that was COVID in 2020. And then the next year I actually went down to driveline and trained. And I mean, there's a whole story with that where like I kind of injured my UCL right before that. But yeah, that was kind of the basics of like development. There wasn't too much going on in terms of like a really good like organization where they're big on development, big on developing players. So it was a lot of like going out and searching for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's I think something that a lot of young athletes can relate with, that you got to figure out not just working hard, but what to work at. And a lot of guys, and something that I dealt with throughout my career, I think a lot of people can relate with, is like kind of wasting time working on the wrong stuff. So tell me about, you mentioned kind of filtering things out. Tell me about your experience and what advice you have for young athletes that are looking for information on what to train, how to train, on, how do you filter things out, and how do you find the things that are useful and good to implement into your routines?
100%. I think, especially as a young athlete, it's easy to get caught up in the minutia of like all the little intricate details of mechanics, details of like, what your pitching coach is telling you to do, the little cues. And I think for especially as a young high school athlete, the main focus on like I had a little group of guys who were really big into like, developing and training and being athletic. And we had a good little circle going, and we'd talk and, talk amongst each other. And our big thing was we got to be athletic, and we got to be athletic. We got to be strong. And, maybe we weren't going about it the most efficient way. We were like, mass equals gas, and we were eating like 5,000 calories a day, just eating whatever we wanted. And I think there's a truth to that, but I don't think it's the whole truth. And my advice to young guys would be like, you got to get a solid foundation. And I think it's a lot simpler than what a lot of people make it out to be. And I think once you have that foundation, then you start to go into more specifics.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important. A lot of guys want to get into all these like little detailed specific things, like all the 1% before they have like that big foundation, which is, 50% or more of what's going to get you where you're at. And see that with a lot of young guys that are kind of undersized. They're not strong enough. They don't move well. They don't have that like good foundation of athleticism. And then they're trying to like work on these little minute details to get them to where they need to be. And at the end of the day, those are the 1%. And I feel like it's so easy to get lost in that and in those little details, because that's kind of the sexy stuff and the stuff that you see online and that gets kind of pushed and promoted. But I feel like that's a big thing, is like it's the mundanity, the mundane tasks, the everyday routine, and building that foundation. That's really what gets you to where you need to go.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of like, I see a lot of guys. I'm talking more specifically in high school, where it was like, oh, this new pivot pickoff variation is going to make me throw harder, or like this one specific drill or this one specific food or whatever the implement might be is going to make me throw harder. And I think it's a lot simpler than that. I think it's, if you want to throw harder, throw more. And while you're doing that, get stronger, get faster, get bigger. And I think it's easy to overcomplicate that. And I think just getting a good strength foundation, moving the body fast, whether that's sprinting, training fast in the weight room, and just throwing more, throw every day. Obviously, you're not going to be throwing bullpens every day, but listen to your body. And I think just as a good starting place, like throw every day, enjoy your throwing every day, throw a football, play spike ball, to warm up. I think those are good ways to not only work on your competitive nature, but also a great way to warm up and train your athletic base as well. You're not doing the same movement over and over again. You're training your body in different positions and giving your brain new puzzles to work with.
Definitely.
Zib, why do you think that it's so easy to get all of these, concepts so overly complicated, especially at a young age? Like, from your perspective, if you look back to those high school days and you look back to now, why do you think it gets so overcomplicated?
Because I think it's overcomplicated because a lot of people are looking for like quick fixes. A lot of people are looking for like, the stuff like Alex was saying that looks sexy, the drills that look sexy. And I think it really is the mundane of like, you want to throw harder, just throw more. And I think even without a coach, your body's going to learn how to move better, how to sequence itself in a way that is more efficient. And I think that's not the sexy thing to learn, because you can't really market that. You can't really sell that. But I mean, once you have that, obviously, then yes, you go into the more specifics in the 1%. And I just think it gets really looked over, that starting place. Like, people want to go from nothing to, oh, I'm going to go to the last 20% of the equation. But no, you have a big 80% that's throw more, lift more, eat more.
Did you get this perspective more so after your injury, or was this something that was like as you were getting drafted and scouted and everything?
I think it was I touched on it earlier, like the group of guys I was around. We had a really good in high school, like even in freshman year, we had a really good group of guys that were big into like training and big into like going to the
Mhm.
gym,
Yeah.
going even we practiced not every day of the week, but we would go out and play catch on the field barefoot. We'd go play spike ball with each other. We'd go to the beach and throw a football. And I think it was a lot of us like discovering it on our own on, hey, this is really working. Like, a lot of the stuff that's being thrown at us from our pitching coach, like not saying that it was all bad, but like it's a lot simpler and there's a lot more like beauty in like the day to day than like as everybody realizes.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's something that we've touched on a lot before too. So that's great to hear you say that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that building a strong routine and a good foundation and just athleticism, like build a body that can be athletic and learn movement. I feel like is so important. And I think a lot of guys miss that because it's not sexy, right? And I think part of that is like, learn and I think today too, we have like a big issue where a lot of guys are specializing really, really early. And so
Yeah.
guys are just doing the same movements, the same movements, the same movements. And some guys you're not going to be able to get them to play a bunch of different sports, but you can incorporate new movements and athleticism within the training and just in their day, daily life. If they're just playing pickup games of spike ball or basketball or whatever. Um, let's talk about, your thoughts on that. And you talked about how when you were young, playing all kinds of different sports and different movements. So let's talk about that. Tell me about your experience and how that affected you and your body.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like what you were saying, like playing pickup, playing spike ball, because correct me if I'm mistaken, but you were showing me you guys got a basketball hoop at your place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
we
mean
got the
that's
basketball hoop
awesome.
and spike ball both.
I mean that's elite. That's gonna make you throw harder. Like I remember, uh, like in high school after we'd lift, like there was a basketball court in the gym that all the boys would lift at, and we'd go play hours of pickup. Probably more than we should have, harder than we should have, but that was like, I think that was a big piece too, because I remember when I was throwing the hardest, I was coming off a winter of training where I was like playing pickup, playing a lot of basketball. I was jumping a lot. I was doing a lot of change of direction, and I think maybe I wasn't even I was definitely specifically like hitting that in my list, but like doing that on a consistent daily basis of like jumping more, running more, doing quick, change of direction movements, that I think definitely had a big piece to play.
Totally, man. Totally. You build that strong foundation of athleticism and your ability to be fast, to move fast and move efficiently. It translates to all the different kind of movements. And there's more than just like the physical aspect of it too, but like there's that like neurological aspect of it where your body is also learning how to move and trying to explain this in a way that kind of makes sense, but the more your body has to learn new movements, the better it gets at learning new movements. And then the better it gets at like exploring the most efficient path to move. And something as complex as the throw, where there's so many moving parts and moving that efficiency up the chain and moving that force up the chain. You have to be efficient at like learning how to move most efficiently. I feel like it all translates, it all connects.
And I think a good way to put it is like, I mean, in my opinion, like your body doesn't know the difference between you playing pickup basketball or doing change of direction drills or jumping mixed in with your weightlifting. Like it doesn't know the difference. Like yes, there's similarities and there's differences. However, I think that if you train something, whether that be your explosiveness, athleticism in a way that pushes you to like push yourself and enjoy yourself while doing it, you're gonna get more out of that than say oh, I'm just gonna do a little box drill, side shuffle. Like
Yeah.
you could go through the motions with that, or if you're running routes, playing, tossing the football around, like you're gonna push yourself and enjoy it more. And I think you gotta find ways to implement that into your training. That's gonna be a huge part in enjoying the development process.
Yeah, I love that because I think we get so far away from that. I think it's also easy to get lost in that in the baseball world too, because, or just any athletics, because I think parents want to look at it and they want coaches to solve all of the problems versus like, what is that? I didn't pay for my son to be playing pickup and spike ball because there's an expectation that coaches should know all the answers to these things. But it's like, it's like you said, our bodies are insanely efficient when left alone, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it is like allowing, and I think great coaches do this, they allow the athletes' bodies to learn their most efficient movement. And I think a lot of guys get stuck in that. And that's definitely something that I can relate with is like you want to find the fix to your issues. And so you start looking at almost like too systematically,
Yeah.
thinking, okay, like this is the problem, this is how to solve the problem, as opposed to like allowing your body to really learn movement and like use that kind of dynamic learning component of what's hardwired within our bodies. Sometimes, it doesn't have to be so structured and like, this is the problem, this is how you fix it. There's multiple ways to solve the issues, and there's multiple ways to move efficiently, and everybody's body is different. It moves differently. It knows how to move different ways, better or worse. It's shaped differently. So not everybody's going to move the same. Not everybody's going to learn the same. Not every cue is going to work the same for everybody. And I think a big thing that works really well for a lot of guys is exploring movement. I think we're like, when you're talking like young athletes just learning how to play the game, a lot of like little league coaches get in trouble where they try to teach these young kids how to move so robotically. And I mean, we were talking about it, where Mahoney's kid, like he's talking about how he taught his kid to throw was just like give him a baseball and let him throw it. And just, when he does it well, encourage him. And he hasn't taught him how to throw in any way. And he's a little kid. I mean, what is he, like 2 years old, 3 years old? And he throws freaking gas. Like it's sick. So I think that's a big part of it, man, is just like allow our bodies are so good at learning movement. And so just allow them to explore and learn and find the most efficient path, because it's not going to be the same for everybody. And to say these are the mechanics that we need every guy to learn, it doesn't work for everybody. You have to allow that person to figure out their most efficient throwing path. And sometimes that allows, kind of stepping back a little bit and allowing the athlete to just be athletic and do their thing and put them in an environment where they're going to be able to thrive with their movement.
Yeah. I think like my biggest, kind of on that point, like my biggest velo jump, like year to year, was after an off season where I didn't have a pitching coach beside me, where I was on the mound, a couple times a week, like tweaking my mechanics, saying, oh, like you got to load into your hip better, your front side's got to be this and that. It was, I was throwing in my garage, I was throwing in a old barn in the middle of winter in Canada, and I was doing pull downs. I was literally pushing my body to move faster and throw the ball harder. And obviously while tracking velocity, but I looking back on it in hindsight, I definitely think that my body learned how to throw harder, where my arm needs to be, where my hips need to be, by pushing my body to its limit of throwing harder and letting it recover and try it again next week and the next week, and having an accumulation of months added up. I didn't have people saying, oh, try having your front arm here. It was no, just I'm throwing hard and I'm gonna push my body to just keep throwing harder, more pull downs. And then obviously I moved into the mound and kind of got into that. Like there's a time and a place for that, but personally that's what I've found has given me the biggest jump.
Yeah. Yeah. And then being aware of like what felt good and what what didn't, and then making adjustments that way, and kind of having that awareness of like, I'm pushing my body, I'm going to see how it self organizes, and then, make a throw that feels good and the velo is a little bit higher. And it's like, oh, what did I feel there? All right, let me try to replicate that, and allowing that feedback to guide you, as opposed to like, I'm trying to mimic this movement. Ultimately, you could look perfectly on the mound and still not be good and not throw hard enough and not have the performance outcomes. And you can look, I mean, there are guys in the bigs that throw gas, and you look at the way that they move and you're like, that doesn't look, as, conventional of what we'd conventionally think is the efficient movement patterns. So ultimately, like, allow the performance feedback to guide you more than just like, this is what it's supposed to look like, even if it's, better another way. I need to mimic what it's supposed to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were you excuse me, were you tracking these numbers and how you felt writing them down, or was it just something that you kind of every day just went out and did?
No, I definitely had, like, especially after my sophomore year. So my sophomore year in the spring, I had a partially torn UCL. So I threw 6 innings my sophomore year,
Mm-hmm.
and I was kind of out for the rest of the season. And I was working with a doctor from Toronto, Ontario, and I went to go visit him, take a look at me, and he helped me. He programmed my list, my throwing, my everything, uh, to kind of tailor towards me to help me get back to pitching. But like, I had the outline of the throws that I needed to make. I
Mm-hmm.
had my training and how it all wove together, and I was tracking. I think that's a big thing, not just going out there without a plan. Like, that's not necessarily what I'm advocating for. It's more
Yeah,
so
sure.
have that plan. It doesn't necessarily have to be the most intricate plan there is, but have a solid foundation and have a solid plan, and just have fun with it. There's ways you can implement other things with it, and while you're throwing hard and trying to throw as hard as you can, track it and try and beat it next time. I think that's as simple as the game is for velocity. Throw as hard as you humanly can today. Let your body recover for a week and try it again next week and track the velocity. And if it isn't going up, problem solve from there. And if it is, keep it up, keep going until it plateaus.
Yeah, I think that's such a valuable thing that a lot of guys miss, especially younger guys, is you kind of have to know where you're headed and where you're going and where you are, and tracking things is a big part of that. You have to understand if you're getting better, and if you're not, obviously something needs to change. You need to make adjustments, and you got to kind of go back to the drawing board. And I think that's where like the test to retest model is very useful in training. But of course, like, you kind of have to know where you're going. And so I think tracking stuff is so valuable for young guys. It's like, if you're never tracking anything, you don't know if you're getting better, and then you're wasting
Mm-hmm.
time. And you can't make the adjustments. Obviously, you have to be patient. Like, if you're tracking stuff and you're like, oh, it's been a week and nothing's gone up, nothing's gotten better. It's like, all right, like, give yourself some time, have some patience with it. Give yourself, a month or two to kind of see some results. Something I've seen in the past too is like, especially with when you're working on like, mechanics and movement, sometimes you'll see a dip before you see a jump, just because your body's learning new movements and it's learning how to move differently. And sometimes that, it takes some time for your body to kind of learn that efficiency and then just let it loose. So like, have the patience to kind of wait for the gains, but at the same time, you can't just go out there without, tracking and knowing if you're getting better. You have to have something that's kind of keeping you accountable and keeping you on track, and keeping you, always understanding if you need to make an adjustment, make a change.
Yeah, I think there's definitely the time and the place for like working specifically on mechanics. Like, you saw it even in when you were here, like with my coming back from Tommy John. Like, my body was like trying to protect the elbow so much that, like, I wasn't even worried about mechanics. That I was just trying to like make my elbow feel good, to the point where it's like my mechanics weren't efficient. They weren't like where they were. So like, just having to like sit down and like be like, hey, you were here before. You look like crap right now. Like let's get back to that.
Yeah.
And piece together like what uh what I needed to fix was a big piece to like I mean, I didn't I'm fully come back obviously I had a second surgery, but that was a big like jump for me to be able to like, oh, it's not 100% my elbow pain. Like I'm actually moving like crap, so therefore I'm throwing like crap.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you got to be able to kind of look at everything and say, all right, these are all the contributors of where I'm at. All right, how do I take the lowest hanging fruit, attack that, and then move from there? And sometimes when you solve the lowest hanging fruit, a bunch of other stuff solves itself and it kind of works its way down the chain. That's a big part of it. But yeah, all right. So then you decide to make the move to Florida as a junior in high school. Obviously, it's a huge move for such a young kid going from one corner of the continent to the other corner of the continent. So let's talk about that experience. What were the lessons you learned during that time? How did that prepare you for where you're at now? And kind of that, having to learn to live on your own and be on the other side of the country or the other different country.
Yeah, I don't know. It was like even looking back, it's surreal that like I did that. I'm like, I don't even know how I came to that conclusion. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna pack up the bags and fly to the other side of the country. But I think it was definitely a bit of a gamble for me because I knew I flashed a lot of like promise for like, you know, pitching and like that, oh, like I can throw hard. I haven't had much time to actually like prove myself as a pitcher. I'd hit really well my sophomore year where I got injured, but I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be like that. Like I don't know if I'm gonna be a professional hitter. It was just like there's a lot of like unknown variables in the equation. So it was definitely a bit of a gamble, but excuse me. Um, I think that taking that risk and that was backed up by a full year more or less and a big off season of, you know, having structure in my training and my development and having and really attacking it every day like that's all I was doing. All I was doing was developing, eating. All I was doing was lifting. All I was doing was throwing. So it was backed up. It wasn't blind. It was backed up by like a lot of confidence in my training, trying to see, hey, if this pays off, like, I don't know where it's going to take me, but I'm confident that like I'm not just doing this for the heck of it. Like I've actually put in the work to like test myself now. So that's more so what it was. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna go get drafted by going down to Florida. No, it was like, oh, I'm gonna test myself, see how I play with the big boys. Coming from Canada, it's not necessarily the terrible competition, but there's a huge difference between Vancouver, British Columbia, and playing in the southeast of Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Arizona. I played all over the country, and I think what I learned was just like the benefit in testing yourself against the best. If that's where you feel like you want to be, like test yourself and test it with it being backed up by, you working your butt off to like see where you are.
Totally. I think that's something that a lot of guys, especially guys who, there's a lot of guys who will kind of shy away from that, and they want to always succeed. But I think there's so much value in failure, and so much learning that comes from failure, and testing yourself against guys who are good, who are better than you. I think that rises you up. It makes you better. It allows you to problem solve better, because if you're always succeeding, you're never learning where your holes are at. But if you face the best, you start to learn. All right, these are the things that are getting exploited, and these are the things I need to get better at.
Hmm. And like when I went down there initially, like I turned 17 in January 30th, and February 1st, I was on a plane to Florida by myself, and I'd never like lived on my own before. I'd never cooked. I'd never done any of that, and I had no clue how I was gonna be compared to the guys on my own team. Like I didn't know anyone down there. I'd never met the coach. I'd met with him like on the phone. So I was really going in blind, like not sure. I was confident in myself and I was confident that I can compete and like work my butt off if if I need to like fight for the last spot, I was confident in that. But I think once I got down there, like I saw the fruits of my hard work, and I saw that like, hey, like I can actually compete with these guys, and from there, I think the confidence definitely plays a big role in like how you perform, but like just having that reassurance of like, I can hang with these guys. I'm still gonna work hard. I'm still gonna compete, but like I'm not here for like a charity job. Like I'm here like because like I can compete and you know, fight for a starting spot on this team.
Definitely, man. Definitely. I'm sure there are all kinds of life lessons too, kind of, being on your own, different place, new place, sure, new culture, new people, and its own set of challenges that was presented with it. So like let's talk about that too. Like what kind of life experience did that give you and what were the life lessons that you learned?
It was very the environment to give you a picture of like what it was. It was four of us. It was four Canadians. Like we had a very diverse team, but it was four of us in an apartment, and we'd wake up decent hour and go to the field. We'd do our baseball work. We'd lift. We'd condition. It was very similar to what I've experienced so far in pro ball. Like, and it's kind of the environment where it's like we're all there for the same reason. We all want to develop. All want to be, get a spot in pro ball, get a spot on a high level D1. Like we were all there with a similar mindset, and it was I learned a lot about like how to go about my business, like and how to you know how to make sure hold myself accountable, and am I working hard enough? Am I eating? Am I sleeping? And learning that like I think I had that first step working at Driveline, understanding what a routine is, and then I think it kind of uh, grew on that point of like now I'm actually like learning what it looks like at a much higher level or much like more professional level, even though it wasn't obviously professional. But I think that was kind of the biggest life lesson I learned was like how to actually take what I knew a good routine looked like and actually execute it while competing against my teammates and like competing against others to like push each other and work hard and try and be better than each other, which I think was done in a very healthy way.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. And having to like learn how to do that on your own too is I think such a big valuable lesson for guys because a lot of guys when they don't have that accountability from people around them and they don't have that realization yet that like if they're gonna do something, they gotta do it themselves and nobody's gonna save them. I feel like that's a big like kind of growth stunter for a lot of guys is kind of relying on other people to, push them, remind them, get on them, as opposed to having that like, internal will and desire to and discipline to get the things done that they need to do and understanding that nobody's going to save you and you gotta go out and make things happen.
And I think that's why it's such a big help to have like-minded people around you because I wasn't totally out there to an extent probably, but I wasn't totally out there, with nobody holding me accountable. I mean, I eventually grew to like be brothers with those guys on the team, and I had like some of my best friends at the time we were holding each other accountable, and we were working towards the same goals. So I think that it's yeah, like I've done both. Like it really sucks, honestly, and it is really hard to push yourself and hold yourself accountable in an environment where you're the only one there. And I think if you want to really grow in your development, you need a place with like-minded guys. You need like-minded people around you. And it'll almost happen so naturally. You won't even be thinking of like, oh, I need to push myself harder. No, it'll just come naturally, fluid, like it'll flow and you'll really see the improvements like coming without much effort necessarily coming if you're that competitive person that truly wants to get better.
Yeah. Yeah. The culture you surround yourself with is so important. There's both sides of it, right? Like you have to surround yourself with the people that are going to help you get better. And at the same time, you have to have like the self-discipline on your own. It's like comes together There's two parts to the equation, and both of them are just as important. And it takes self-discipline to surround yourself with the right people as well, too, right? Like that's all a choice of where you're going to put yourself and the situations you're going to put yourself in and the people you're going to gravitate yourself towards. It's all part of it. And that's so valuable, so valuable. Yeah. So then you get drafted as a junior in high school and enter pro ball as an 18-year-old. Obviously, that's a big step for a young kid. Or were you 17 when you got drafted?
Oh, I was 17.
You're 17. So you enter pro ball as a 17-year-old. Obviously, that's a huge step for a young kid. Let's talk about your experience so far in pro ball, some of the lessons you've had to learn and adjustments you've had to make, and all of that. That's kind of come with the beast that is pro ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a lot to unpack there, but I don't know. I think obviously I've been injury ridden literally since I got drafted. So there's definitely a ton of lessons that I've learned on, the mental side, physical side. Like we go into like really like any one of those.
Let's jump into it, man. I mean, whatever you want to talk about, we can kind of get into the mental side first and talk about that, and then we can kind of deviate into some of the physical stuff that you've been doing, your routine and all that.
Mm-hmm. I think mentally, like I've had kind of, I wouldn't say 3 procedures. Maybe that might be the right word, but like I first had, uh, we tried to go the PRP injection into my UCL or area first. That obviously didn't work, and that was kind of at the end of 22, right after I got drafted. So right after Instructs in September, October I got the PRP, and then I tried to come back in spring training, still really nagging with the elbow, and Tommy John in May of 23, and then coming back, still having pain, not really kind of progressing, having, little setbacks on my elbow that are just not really sure what they are. And then eventually a year later in April, or I think in April, I'm not even sure, it's been a blur, but
Yeah.
kind of 11 months after that, I had the nerve transposition. And so that was kind of like a background on like what all's happened. I mean, it's been a roller coaster mentally because, you know, I'd never experienced anything like that where, I kind of had, I kind of went from like the high of like being like, you know, oh, like I go from not sure if I'm going to get drafted to get drafted, being a high prospect to, okay, now my elbow doesn't work anymore and I'm stuck in Arizona for 2 years. So it was kind of like going from like a low to a high to even lower low. But I think I've learned a lot mentally on, finding like an identity in your, like outside of baseball. And like I've definitely been blessed like with talents in baseball and the rest of it, athletically, physically. But I think finding not having your whole identity wrapped in baseball is a very healthy thing to do. And I'm not advocating for like, oh, don't be competitive, don't enjoy it, don't work hard. But like, there's more to life, and there's more to your purpose and your value than just baseball. And I think once I came to that realization, that really kind of gave me peace at where I am, and even more determination, purpose in my rehab process.
Totally, man. Totally. That's something that I have talked about a lot, is like learning. One thing that we advocate for a lot, Joey and I, is like finding finding purpose outside of baseball and finding your identity outside of baseball. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be a fierce competitor, but it allows you to have, like you said, peace. And that's something that I think I found out in my last year during my career. And it allowed me to perform so much better, because then when I went out there, when I went about my routine, when I went to the field, I was able to just enjoy the competitiveness and the little competitions, the little things, the smell of the grass, the reps, every rep, and just go out there and enjoy it and just lock in on every moment and everything I did, as opposed to being kind of like too preoccupied with the outcome. and allowing that to distract me and kind of where my performance was and just focusing on the task at hand. I felt like it gave me so much more one piece and like an ability to just be competitive and go out there and do what I needed to do and then flip off the switch and then regroup, because otherwise you burn out if the switch is always on.
For me, one of the biggest things was also like I found myself playing baseball to play baseball versus playing baseball because I like to play baseball. And I think that a lot of kids find themselves in that position too. And then when baseball becomes their identity and you get hurt or someone tells you you can't do it anymore, that's when things get kind of dangerous. Did you go down that route then, Zib, where baseball was your identity at this point, or when you got hurt, were you able to disassociate yourself, the human from the game?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I was kind of just, I don't know how to put it, but like while I was kind of riding that high of like, oh, I'm in pro ball, I'm doing so well, like I kind of was like oblivious to, like, I wouldn't say it was in my entire identity. I wouldn't say like that's all I had, and if I lost that, like I would crumble and cry or whatever. But I think like having my elbow health and whatever taken away from me kind of humbled me in sense of like pointing me towards like just pointing me towards like life and how much bigger it is and how much beauty there is in life outside of myself even and outside of baseball. That baseball, I've been blessed with you know everything that I've been given, but you know like being injured opens your eyes to you know the world around you and how big it is, and honestly how like little and insignificant your thing is, and how blessed you are to like be in the position that you are in regardless of your health. you know like I could still say like, oh, I've gone through two surgeries and elbow injections and what have you, and had so many setbacks. But if you look back and say like, wow, like I know personally many people who would kill to be in my position in pro ball, who would you know who are healthy and aren't able to have the same opportunities that I have. And you could go even deeper than that, and just realizing that like I'm in such a blessed position even to be rehabbing, and even being injured, I'm blessed to be injured. Like there's blessings that come from the position that like God wants to put me in and have me here in Arizona. So I think just realizing that like it's a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such, and I've talked about it before, is like as much as rehab presents with challenges and it sucks and there's a lot of things that go into it, it's also such a blessing because you learn so much in the rehab process. Such a great learning opportunity. Obviously, you don't want guys to get injured, but there's so many good things that come out of it, and guys come out of the other end of it so much, with so much knowledge that they've accumulated through the process. At the end of the day, like where you end up, you're going to be better because of the experience, and there's blessings there that wherever you do end up, there's a lot of value in the lessons that you're learning. And if everything goes smoothly and perfectly and all that stuff, like you're going to be a better pitcher because of it, and you're also going to be a better human because of it, because you're going through more, and it allows you to grow and learn about yourself and learn about others and learn about the process.
Yeah, I think like adding to that point, like me personally, like yes, I'm injured, but I've seen so many blessings in terms of like the position that I'm in now. I'm able to grow closer in my relationship with my family, with my girlfriend, with my close friends, like with God even, and like having that opportunity, like, and not being so focused on myself has like blessed my life so much. And I think uh like looking outside of myself has even improved me as an individual. Like I've learned more about health. I've learned more about like you know nutrition, my physical health, to the point where it's like I wouldn't have been able to be in that position if all I was doing was being consumed with myself and baseball. So I think that like there's many more examples I can give of how I've been blessed in rehab that like that's just a small spectacle of it. But
Yeah, yeah, totally, man, totally. Like, and you're also someone that I feel like you learn things well. You learn things quickly, and you're very introspective. And I think that's something that a lot of guys can take, and like, even if they're not going through rehab, just like in any process, in or outside of baseball, is like being able to be aware of where you're at and things that you're able to learn and the things you're able to get from the position you're in, and kind of be in the moment that you're in, and like take everything in.
mhm. Yeah, and even like I've had the like opportunities to like slow down and my days aren't terribly like busy. Like I still work hard, but slow down and like be able to like read more and get more educated and have more time to you know build friendship, you know build my health in baseball and outside. So I think like there's many different there's many different negatives I could focus on, but I think there's way more positives that have come from it than I ever could have imagined. So I mean, I think the good thing for anyone going through rehab is to focus on like the positives, as many or as few as there are. Like you're gonna be in a much better position, actively searching for the positives.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And yeah, I know you're someone who loves to learn and really lock in every aspect of what could contribute to your health and performance. And there are some things that you incorporate into your lifestyle that some consider radical or interesting or kind of, different or haven't even heard of. So let's talk about your routines, habits, and diet, why you choose to incorporate those things into your lifestyle and what that does for you.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that I've like learned over these past 2 years. Like when I first got into pro ball as a 17-year-old, I didn't know anything about nutrition. I barely knew how to cook, and I mean, I'd go to bed when I wanted to. I'd wake up when I want to. I'd eat what I want to. Not saying that I was like necessarily eating terribly or sleeping terribly, but like I've found such a contrast in like how what I do now compared to what I did prior. So I mean that's a big subject. I think the biggest unlock for me was the two were nutrition and sleep in particular. Yeah, like sleep, I think is vital to recovery. I mean, it's known that like sleep, oh, it's good for your health, good for your recovery, good for your hormones, good for your mind, good for your soul, everything. People know that, but I think they kind of don't look towards it as like low-hanging fruit, going back to that idea. Like it really is low-hanging fruit that might be more important than you actually lifting. And, you know, I do a lot of things where whether it be, you know, going outside and, watching the sunset before I go to bed, really helping my circadian rhythm, whether it's, you know, trying to stay away from blue light, once the sun goes down, sleeping in a cold, dark room. Like these are all things that you can add into your sleep to really enhance your recovery and your whole state of being, honestly.
Totally, man. Totally. That's something that a lot of guys miss because they don't prioritize their sleep, and it's so important. Like you said, like yeah, sometimes it's important to than getting that lift in or whatever it is that's keeping you from sleeping. You need to recover, and if you're not giving your body the adequate kind of building blocks to recover and opportunity to recover itself, the stimulus doesn't matter because you're not getting the result of the stimulus. And that's a huge part of it, man. A huge part of it.
Yeah, and we have, especially as baseball players in pro ball or in high school, whatever. I think even amateurs would have more stress than a professional baseball player because they're getting stressed from, excuse me, their development, from their throwing, their lifting, their school, from their personal life, through, little things that you don't think add up, but they really do. And, you go over a course of a day or a week, like it's adding up. And if you're not properly recovering, you know, it's all worthless if, you worked out for 2.5 hours in the gym and you got such a crazy pump and, you pulled down and PR'd, but if you don't sleep and if you don't eat properly after that, then the next week you ain't going to be able to do that.
Yeah,
And it's going to accumulate over time to the point where it's like you're going to get worse. You're going to be training, even if you're training, the most efficiently with all your heart, like it's not gonna add up or equate to anything.
totally, totally. I remember must have been a handful of years ago or a few years ago, Justin Verlander was talking about the importance of sleep. And he was talking about how he gets like 12 to 14 hours of sleep every night and how important that is to his routine and how much he prioritizes that. And I think that's so valuable for guys to understand because even like, the norm is like 8 hours a night, which is like your baseline amount. Like once you start to learn about sleep, you realize 8 hours is like the baseline. This is the minimum of sleep I need. But even then, like, and that's like, for someone of, our age playing ball, whatever. But then on top of that, you add the training stimuli and like all the effort that you're putting in the day. So you need extra sleep for that to kind of make up for that. And then you also have during your sleep times where you're, those disturbances that add up to half an hour, even sometimes an hour and a half in some people. And so to get, the baseline 8 hours, sometimes guys need really 9 hours. And then you add on top of that, their training and all the exercise they're putting in and all of that. And then you add like a couple more hours. Next thing you know, you're needing 10, 11, 12 hours to fully recover from the activities of the day. And then on top of that, guys are chronically sleep deprived. And so they have all this sleep that accumulated and their body is just like, falling way behind.
Mm.
Because guys are saying, oh, you know what, I'll cut it and I'll get 7 hours. That's close enough to 8 hours. But in reality, your body needed 11, 12 hours to fully recover from the amount of work that you're putting in, especially when you're playing baseball at a high level.
Yeah, I think that that, and also in addition to like your sleep environment, like I think that what I've learned plays a big role. Like, I mean, you talk about radical. Like I was telling you before we hopped on, it was like me and my roommate put an iron on in front of our thermostat so that it reads 100 degrees. So the AC works overtime, and we're getting our rooms to like 60 degrees because it's better for you to sleep in a cold environment, and your body's able to get into much deeper sleep, and you're not gonna have those like disturbances like you were talking about, and like just little things like that. Like, I mean, like you can go deep into it. Like, yeah, like you could just sleep normally, get 8 hours, but like, is what's the quality of that 8 hours? What's like, how well are you actually sleeping during those 8 hours? And I've done a bunch of like, I've done Whoop, I've done Aura, and currently I don't track anything because I think, like for me personally, like I enjoy doing a lot more like focusing on my like internal clock, like my circadian rhythm, where I fall asleep at the same time, I wake up at the same time, and I'm dialed in that way to where my body is like more or less a machine. And I'll give you an example in my life. Like I love my girlfriend, but me and her went to a concert the other night, and I've never been to a concert before, and I'm like an old man when it comes to like my bedtime. Like I turn my red light on, I hop into bed and I read a book and I'm lights out. And by like 9:30, 10, and like we go to this concert, and I didn't know how I was feeling about it. I got my like blue light blocking glasses on with the red lenses, looking like an alien in the crowd. And I mean, just my body was just affected so much by the loud sounds, the blue lights, the like the environment, to where, because for the last 2 years, I've been like going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, having a good nightly routine, cutting out all blue light, really like letting my body like relax and prepare for bed even before I fall asleep. And it's such a shock to my system. And I love my girlfriend, but I think she would even attest to like how it affected me. I wasn't in a good spot after that, and it really affected me. And that was recent. And then today I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna set an alarm. I'm just gonna sleep for as long as I can. And I literally slept for like 12 or 13 hours last night because it was like I'd been so that debt accumulated even just over like that day or two because it does affect you more than one day. So, I needed to really sleep in today. So yeah, that's just a little story about, you know, how much like it can affect you when you're dialed in with your sleep.
Totally, man. Totally. And that routine is so important too, because a lot of people talk about how like, oh, like I could never sleep longer than however long. But a lot of time it's because your body doesn't know how to. You can't even turn on your parasympathetic nervous system, that relaxing side of your nervous system, because you don't have that routine. You're taking in all this blue light late at night. You have these, sounds, and you're not, going outside watching the sun go down. You're not giving your body the cues to say, hey, it's time to relax and go to sleep and whatever. And you don't have that routine. Your body doesn't even know how to sleep. So it's almost like you have to teach yourself how to properly sleep and how to, get your circadian rhythm dialed in, to really, get the benefits of all that.
Yeah, like I definitely had to learn how to sleep coming into pro ball because, you know, in high school, you're out with your friends, you're up on your phone. There's a lot of like things where you just kind of put sleep to the side, and there's nights where sometimes you take melatonin, or like I think that's the big one, especially for young guys, where I see guys like crushing melatonin, like they're taking some like freaking vitamin D supplement or something. Like it's just something normal, and it's like that destroys your body's ability to like fall asleep by itself, and you're not getting the same quality of sleep. So I had to learn how to not be reliant on like that, and learn how to like actually like learn how to build my internal clock to where it's like, yeah, I cut out blue light. I'm off my phone, where I have a bunch of like inputs of, I'm not scrolling on my phone and getting a bunch of like drastic differences between like, oh, I'll watch a sad video, and I'll watch a super happy video, and I'll watch something crazy happen. And it's just keeping my mind awake so much, and like learning to stop doing that, which is very difficult, and like teaching your body how to sleep, and you realize that your body is more than capable of falling asleep in like less than 5 minutes now. Like I can fall asleep when it's bedtime, like right away. Like I haven't struggled with falling asleep in years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a game changer, man. Having that routine is a game changer, man. The other big thing that you mentioned was something that you dialed in is your nutrition and your diet. Let's talk about that and kind of get into some of the radical stuff you're doing with your diet.
Yeah, I just think like I think the big three for like developing anything, even outside of baseball, is for your health is nutrition, training, and sleeping. And I think if you have those three, even on a very fundamental level, you're going to be ahead of a lot of people. And I think that especially applies to baseball. And what my kind of like idea with my eating is just like I just want to intake enough protein for my body. And I think that like nutrient dense, good sources of protein, like that's the main building block of my diet, of my nutrition. Because yes, the sleep builds muscle, but you also need the nutrition to aid in that. Like they're equally as important to building your muscle and being able to create those adaptations from the training stimuluses from throwing, lifting to actually utilize those. So I think just like, I mean, I eat like 2 pounds of beef a day, and it's not that I'm completely carnivore. Like I'll eat a vegetable, I'll eat fruit, I'll eat a piece of sourdough, but it's just like, and I've never felt so good as I do now, even aside from baseball. Just like eating this way, where I'm getting enough protein for my body, or even in a surplus, and I'm just eating foods that don't have a list of ingredients that I can't pronounce and that would take me forever to read. I eat beef, I'll eat chicken every now and then, I'll eat, you know, apple, I'll eat a carrot, just stuff that's like you're eating real food. You're not eating these processed carbs, you're not eating the processed sugars, stuff that has only been food for the last 10 years, 20 years, like just sticking to foods that, occur in nature. Like you're going to be so much farther ahead than everybody else if you just stick to that and not, these, deep fried processed fast food places. You think, oh, I'm eating a chicken sandwich or I'm eating a burger, like it has protein. Like, no, the quality of that, the the method of which they cook, like it all factors in, and just cooking for yourself and knowing what you're putting in your body is kind of the whole idea of how I go about my nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that I'm really working on right now is like slowly switching everything out in my diet to eliminate all these toxins and pesticides and processed stuff. And it's crazy, man. You go to the grocery store and even at like a place like Whole Foods, it's supposed to be, healthy whole foods. You'll see this list of ingredients, all this stuff, these seed oils, all kinds of stuff. But at the end of the day, like if you really want to thrive, you got to have that nice, clean, real food. I call it like God's diet. You're eating like God's food that He put on the earth. It's like these clean foods. They don't have pesticides, sprayed all over them. They're not all processed with all these, just like random ingredients that aren't even real food. And they're just put in there to preserve it for forever and make it taste or look a certain way. At the end of the day, if you really want to thrive, you just got to eat like true, real food that's clean, that's not toxic, that doesn't have all this processed stuff in it. And a lot of
Mhm.
guys get away from that because they don't even know how to read an ingredients label. And I think that's such an important skill that I'm learning now. And I'm realizing is so important is like learning how to read an ingredient label because there's so many things in our foods that we don't even realize are toxic and destroy our bodies and don't allow us to thrive. And it takes a little bit of effort, but I'm realizing it's not impossible to do. It's actually much simpler and easier than I thought. You just have to learn how to read an ingredients label and just kind of go through and start substituting over time your foods and you can eat just as deliciously and eat just as much of the things that you want to eat, and you feel significantly better. One of the things that I'm doing now is because I love tacos. So instead of buying tortillas pre-made at the grocery store, I buy like the corn flour, and it's simple. You just use a clean corn flour that doesn't have a bunch of stuff in it, mix it with some water. You make the tortillas yourself. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. It's cheaper because you can make way more tortillas for the same price. And if you feel better eating it, you're eating cleaner, you're eating better, and honestly, it tastes way better. And it's like stuff like that. If you learn how to, buy the right things and make things on your own and make things from scratch, you feel better, you spend less money, depending on the thing. Sometimes it's more money, but and it just your body feels so much better.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things, whether it's, pesticides or seed oils. Like you don't have to be a doctor or some, buddy who's well versed in, nutrition to understand. Just look up a video of how seed oils are made and look up the history of them. Like they're a, you know, they were engine lubricant. They were, some byproduct of, refining cotton, and like it was just something that, you know, has only existed for like the last 70 years, not even. So just and realizing and looking in for yourself to the negative health of side effects of, pesticides that disrupt your hormones, and like these are things that they label like carcinogens that causes cancer, that they're putting on food casually, and people, it's not the people's fault, but you know they're oblivious to like what's actually going on, and like your hormones are a big part as well. Like I think that's maybe not maybe the lowest hanging fruit, but like once you get a good foundation, like looking into your hormones and like which sleep and everything else plays a factor on, but like what you ingest, like you'll see like how it affects your body, whether it's your skin, whether it's your mental clarity, whether it's how you feel every day. And you could go on and on about like these pesticides, seed oils, different, gums, preservatives, sugars. Like I think you made a good point with the God's diet. Like eat stuff that people in the Bible would eat. Eat meat, eat honey, eat, you know, fruit, vegetables. Like it doesn't have to be so complicated, but like eat food that's always been food.
Yeah.
You know, don't cook your food and stuff that's a new invention that you know people would use to lubricate machinery with, and that's bleached, that's processed and to the point where they heat it up super hot and throw chemicals in it to make it not stink and make it clear and make it like sellable to the consumer. Like you go on and on about that, but just any advice for any player listening to this would just be like eat food that has always been food. Cook your food in fats and in oils that have always been around.
Yeah. Yeah. And a big part of that too is inflammation. All those foods, all those toxins, chemicals, everything, they play such a big role in creating inflammation in your body. And we know how important that is for recovery. We don't want inflammation. We want the least amount of inflammation. Obviously, there's a good level of inflammation, but we don't want to overload our body with all kinds of inflammation from outside things, right? From different stimuli like food. We want that inflammation to come, the good kind of inflammation where the nutrients are coming to the muscles from the training stimulus, and we don't want it to overload. We want it to be just the right amount. Our food, if we're getting inflammation because we're eating all these chemicals and stuff, that's going to overload our body. It's not going to be good for us. So that's a big part of it, man. But yeah, and then we'll finish off with just kind of one more question for you. What advice do you have for athletes trying to decide if they're going to go play in college or go straight into pro ball out of high school?
Yeah, I think it's a simple choice. If you have the opportunity to get into pro ball, I think whatever opportunity that is out of high school, take it because that's going to be the best thing for your life. I mean, there's a lot of different routes you can go about it with, college and the stuff you take in there, but pro ball is where you want to be. You want to be if you're serious about baseball and you want to play professionally, don't give up the opportunity to get your foot in the door earlier because nothing's a guarantee. Because even myself, I'm grateful that I chose to come into pro ball, but I was honestly contemplating turning down, the money, turning down the offer and doing my senior year of high school. And it was a blessing because you don't know if you're going to get Tommy John. You don't know if you're going to injure yourself or where life's going to take you. And if you truly believe that professional baseball is where you want to be and where you want to end up, get in it however you can, regardless of the money, regardless of, what people are saying. Just give it your best shot, get in it, and work hard. I mean, that's as simple as it is.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously you're blessed to be in one of the best, organizations in baseball, one of the best player development organizations in baseball, and definitely with some of the best people in baseball, which I think is something that the Guardians take a lot of pride in. So I think that's a factor too, is like where you get drafted. If you're going to be in a place that's going to prioritize you as an individual and your development and put you in a good culture and good environment, I think it's a great opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Awesome. But yeah, man, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thanks for your time. And I think you gave some really, really awesome insight for our listeners, and for everybody listening. I hope you can take a lot of this information and apply it to your life and really elevate your game to the next level. So, for everybody listening, stay fearless.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Stay Fearless, the Fearless Sports Performance Podcast with all things baseball performance training. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, like, subscribe, comment, reach out to us, and keep the conversation going.
You can check out our website at fearlesssportsperformance.weebly.com, and you can find us on Instagram at Fearless Sports Performance or on X at FearlessBSBL. Until next time, stay fearless.